And welcome to the Inside Britball podcast. My name's Andy Taylor and I'm joined by Stuart and Isaac. And if you're watching, you will notice that we have a very, very special guest with us tonight. He doesn't like talking about himself, but he's here to give us all his thoughts on all things BUCS. We have Tonye, who's the American football program lead for BUCS. And we're delighted to have you, Tonye. Thank you for joining the Inside Britball podcast.
Thanks for having me, guys. Delighted and glad to be here.
Brilliant. We were delighted to get you such short notice as well. But we're going to basically center this whole conversation on your thoughts on this year, and we'll maybe get some conversations around what's happened in what's been a very exciting year. And it hasn't even finished yet, and we're already reflecting on a very impressive year. So, you know, you're a very important man in the American football world of BUCS, and you see he's already shaking his head. But you're also the teacher for all of us who have no idea what's going on with the standings and all the rules. But Tonye, in your words, what do you do within the BUCS American football? For those that don't know.
Good question. Depends on who you speak to, really, and who you ask. Certain people say I don't actually do anything, but I don't know.
Not true.
Essentially, my role is to manage and deliver our league and knockout program. So essentially, the American football competition within sort of the BUCS program. So that's, I guess, a large part of my role. So if you like, sort of a league commissioner type position, but the sort of wider and more holistic picture or sort of set out for my role is to manage American football in its entirety within the HE sector. So looking after the growth and development of the game within the higher education sector. So that is obviously the contact programs we currently have and the growth and development of that, but it's also looking at flag football as well and trying to grow and develop that within the HE space. So holistically, that is essentially what my role is. Within BUCS, we're a team of two. So there's me, the American Football Program Manager, and Keith Kehoe, who has recently come on board or came on board this year, who is the American Football Program Assistant. So between us, like I said, our role is to essentially do everything American football related within the HE sector.
That's a huge task because we all know the number of teams that are involved and the number of fixtures that happen across that time. So it must take up a lot of your time as well. So I suppose what people might be interested in is that is there almost like a strategic oversight that you work with rather than it all landing on your shoulders within the BUCS initiatives?
So there is a strategic oversight, one which we've sort of set, but it's one that sort of feeds into the wider sort of holistic BUCS strategy. So there is an ultimate BUCS strategy, and American football as one of the 55 sports essentially feeds into that. So there's that, but at the same time as well, with our role being, or our department being funded by BAFA, the NGB as well, we sort of have to feed into BAFA's sort of strategic view for the game in the UK as well. So I don't want to say I'm serving two masters, but essentially there are two bodies which my little team sort of has to sort of report into and sort of work and collaborate with.
It's a mammoth task to be able to get all those fixtures out. I've got BAFA experience of getting fixtures out. It's not easy, and you've got more teams than an adult contact, I'm pretty sure. So I'm sure it's fun every time you have to plan fixtures and get things together.
It's a very enjoyable task, and I make it even more difficult for myself because I essentially make every schedule. So essentially reach out to all teams in pre-season asking for dates to avoid, and essentially, when they would like their fixtures scheduled, and basically have multiple Excel documents opened trying to factor in all those preferences to get a fixture out. So it's always a whole lot of fun, and it's always very nice once that goes out and in week one teams end up changing the fixtures and rearranging fixtures after all the hard work that's got into that. So always lovely when that happens.
And with it being a winter sport, you can't account for storms and waterlogged pitches. And we ended up with quite a backloaded schedule in the end this year, didn't we? Because of all that terrible weather that we had over the winter. But I suppose then what we want to start kind of getting your reflections on is obviously the season that's nearly finished. We've only got 6 or 7 games left, haven't we? Maybe a little bit more than that. But it's obviously a challenge to get it started. But kind of what are your reflections just at this point on the season that's gone by from your point of view?
I think it's been a good season. It's funny because I have the American Football Conference, which we're hosting on Saturday, and I've just been sort of pulling through and working through the numbers in sort of preparation for that. Again, I'm a very sort of data-driven person, and I like numbers and I like looking at numbers. I think people could have sort of subjective views as to how the season's gone, but objectively, I think numbers and data don't necessarily lie. And I think just looking at the numbers and sort of the data from the season, I think it's been a good season. So we had 266 league fixtures across all 15 of our leagues. I think we had about a 91% completion percentage of those fixtures, sort of an increase in sort of one possession games, which sort of shows a greater sort of level of competitiveness across the leagues, and a slight reduction in blowout percentages as well there. So I think looking at the data, fixtures are being played, are being completed. They're relatively more competitive than they have been in previous seasons. I think when you look at those sort of numbers, for me, like I said, just looking at it objectively and looking at the data, I think I'm happy with that. If you ask me to take my objective hat off and sort of put my subjective hat on, I think just the quality of games this year, I think, has been great. The games I've been to, the games we've obviously live streamed as well through BUCS, has been great. I think if you sort of look at the National League and sort of the introduction of that, I think it's been great for what it's done. We've had some real competitive, real thrilling games in that league. Obviously, that there have still been blowouts in the National League. I think that's something that's ultimately unavoidable in any sport. You can look at sort of box, Super Rugby, men's and women's, which is the highest level of competition we have in the whole box pyramid, and there's still blowouts in those leagues. So us creating the National League wasn't going to completely write off blowouts. That is always sort of a possibility in any sport. But I think if you look at sort of the improved levels of competition, the sort of improved operating standards from those teams, I do really believe the National League has been a success in its first season. I think that's the key thing to remember as well. It is its first season. There is still a lot of room and area for growth. But I think if you look at sort of the knock-on effects to Prem North and South beneath it and sort of Tier 1, I think what we've potentially seen with the creation of the National League, which we hoped for, is sort of a more leveling out or more balancing of those sort of leagues beneath it. And again, I think the numbers just show that as well. If you look at sort of the number of one possession games and sort of the reduction in blowouts in those leagues as well. So I think, holistically, I'm happy with how the season's gone so far. I think if we move past the leagues and look out the knockouts, obviously slightly disappointed that there were 3 knockouts, I think, 3 walkovers, 2 walkovers in the knockouts, which again isn't great because you're depriving competition there for students, but at the same time there was potentially another team who could have qualified and got into that position, who potentially would have been in a position to play that game. But again, these things happen. It's not unique to American football. It happens in our 23 other league and knockout competitions as well. So again, but it's just not great. But yeah, I think holistically and looking at the season as a whole, happy with how it's gone. Again, it's still far from over. We have, semi-final games for the Conference Cup, North and South Conference Cups, and obviously have the big finals on Tuesday. So yeah, still I wouldn't say a long way, but still some way to go, and still a whole lot of excitement to experience before the season wraps up completely.
Yeah, this season, one thing you talk about is the competitiveness of games. That National League's really created that, and you can see that in week one when UW hosted Notts. What's it like as someone who's, kind of made this happen? As like now we're getting a more competitive league where teams are able to play against teams who they should be playing against.
Yeah, I think, again, I'll be honest and say, being at that game, I was at the game, and obviously it was live streamed, that first game. There was a sense of relief, I think, that came over me, and a sense of satisfaction that came over me. And again, I'm hoping, as sort of neutrals watching the game, or fans generally watching the game, that there was that sense of satisfaction and anticipation that hopefully would have come over others as well, because again, this is ultimately, I believe, what people would want to be seeing, not just at the top level, but across the league or across the pyramid, competitive, exciting football. I think just looking at that game and watching that game, regardless of what the final score was, I think just watching a truly competitive game at the very pinnacle of our pyramid, what was great to see, and it honestly set us up for it set a great platform for us to sort of launch off and work from. So yeah, that first game was incredible. Again, there have been closer games as well. Again, Nottingham Durham, like both games have been or both league games were pretty close as well. Obviously split the fixtures one apiece in the league. Again, the last league game, or last National League game of the season between Nottingham and UE. Again, that was a very close game that literally came down to inches. Silas Starr had that chance to make that touchdown catch right at the end of the game, which was literally this much. He stepped out of bounds, and that was essentially it. So again, I think as sort of a neutral, thinking about sort of the entertainment value of the league, I think this is ultimately what we were hoping for, and ultimately what we were wanting to see. I think sort of speaking to coaches and speaking to players as well who are part of the National League, they're really enjoying it as well, having a chance to prepare and go up against teams who are going to give you a challenge week in and week out. It's ultimately what you want, and it's ultimately why you want to be involved in the game as well. So no, really excited about that, and really happy with how it's gone. But yeah, to be honest, all I did was essentially put papers together, or put pen to paper, and try and get things done through, I guess, the bureaucratic ways. It's ultimately the teams who have gone out and sort of invested in the coaches, invested in getting students into their institutions, have obviously invested in meeting the sort of minimum operating standards required to be in the National League. So like I said, all I've essentially done is just do the bureaucratic work, if you like. It's ultimately the institutions who are going out there and actually doing what needs to be done to put out that exciting product.
Yeah, you spoke about coaches there. Last week on the podcast, we had Coach Bo from the Leeds Griffins. She spoke about how highly she thought of the new structure and the new format of BUCS. How do you feel that when you're a coach who openly will speak about how happy they are with the work that you've essentially done?
Yeah, like I said, it's not really all on me, but again, happy that there are people out there who have seen sort of the benefits and are reaping the benefits of this. I think, again, when you sort of spoke there, Andy, at the start, about sort of the strategic goals we work towards, and sort of BUCS's ultimate strategy is sort of deliver exceptional student member experiences, and that's ultimately what we're looking to do. And if by creating a National League we've been able to do that, that is a win for us, and that's ultimately why we're doing it. It's to deliver those exceptional sporting experiences. And if we have coaches like Coach Bo, or players, students, all saying that their sort of experience of Uniball, if you like, has improved because of the changes we've made, it ultimately means we are doing what our students want and what our members want. And I think going into the whole process of creating the National League, that is something that I did go into knowing and believing that that is what the students wanted, again, because we sort of did a survey in the lead up to it, and overwhelmingly the sort of responses were they felt a national league was what was ultimately needed. And again, sort of the data potentially show that as well. So again, combining, I guess, the quantitative data with the qualitative data of what our students were actually saying ultimately led to that decision. So again, like I said, yes, I did the bureaucratic work, but essentially I was just doing what I felt what the people wanted.
Too modest.
I was going to ask how it all sort of started, because I think there's a little need for this now in our National League game, so outside of BUCS.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, what do you think the process of that sort of tumbleweed growing into the moss ball that started this National League for BUCS, how do you think that could be translated into our National League? And do you think it would be a success in the National League?
Interesting question. I should almost take my BUCS hoodie off when I'm answering the second part of the question and answer it as Tonye, the London Warriors player. But I'll start, I guess, with the first part of the question as to how it sort of started with BUCS. And I'll be honest, when I interviewed for this role back in, what was it, February 2022, I remember in my interview, I highlighted clearly that something I was passionate and adamant about doing was creating, in the interview, I termed it a super league, but it wasn't going to be a super league because it has to become a national league before it becomes a super league. We only have one true super league at the moment, which is, like I said, men's and women's rugby union. But in the interview, I essentially said American football at BUCS, it was calling out and crying out for a super league, but essentially a national league. And again, that was just for me as an outsider looking at it from someone who obviously played whilst at university as well, but just viewing what I felt was the current status of the league. But essentially what took me 3 seasons from that interview point to bring it into fruition. And the reason why was essentially we obviously lost 2 seasons due to COVID. So we, like I said, I'm someone who's driven by data. We essentially needed to build up that bank of data to actually prove to our members that a national league is needed or was needed. And like I said, needed to do sort of that member consultation. So actually consulting with our students, consulting with our coaches. And something I've always prided myself on doing is actually going out and about to the grounds to actually see what games look like and what the actual scenario is, not just looking at scores. So doing that over 2 seasons to actually just collate and sort of have this bank of information and bank of evidence, if you wish, that a national league is needed. So that was sort of the process in collating or doing the research behind it. But the process of actually changing it is, again, it's a bureaucratic process, which again goes through a lot of member consultation and papers, and rightfully so, because again, our competition is for the members, by the members. So it has to be protected for the members to ensure it's exactly what the members want. And there was sort of a deliberate process that needed to be followed there. And thankfully we were able to sort of have that process work its way out and ultimately lead to the National League. So like I said, it was just sort of doing the research and building the evidence to get that done. Going to the second part of the question as to how that potentially translates to the adult game and if that is potentially what is needed. I do potentially feel like a national league of some sorts is potentially needed. I think there potentially a couple of obstacles which obviously need to be considered and factored in. With any national league, it's always going to be travel and sort of the costs that come and associated with that. That was obviously a major consideration as well for the BUCS National League. I guess the easier part of navigating that is it's ultimately an institution, it's ultimately a university which will be sort of paying for that. If you look at the adult league, it's ultimately going to be the players who are potentially going to be funding that by sort of increased subs or whatever the case is, to sort of fund the National League travel. So that's the sort of major consideration that sort of needs to be taken into account then, and whether or not players are in a position to fund that. But from my view, just again thinking about creating more competitive games, creating sort of a better spectacle for people to be involved in, I do believe a national league of some sorts is sort of needed in the adult game.
It'll be interesting, won't it? Because we do always see that in adult contact, which you saw obviously last year and years gone by, where there was these almost like two tiers within the top tiers.
Yeah.
And we have seen that in recent years, haven't we? We are all wondering whether the Prem North is going to be the outlier this year around that, because they all look very competitive.
Yeah,
but as you guys show, things change when they go to London sometimes, don't they? So we will see how that plays out going forward. But just out of interest, just around the whole sort of structure, the National League, obviously, Durham to UE is Durham to Bristol is a very big travel, big journey. Obviously, Bristol's not the furthest south. If there was a Portsmouth or if there was a Scotland, such as a Stirling, does that change anything from the National League point of view when it comes to such travel? Because they're almost like plane journeys, aren't they? Those sort of distances.
It doesn't change anything. So again, if teams qualify to be in the National League again through working their way up the pyramid, it doesn't change anything. So teams will still be expected to make that travel. Again, I probably will get a few more angry emails about the travel and level of travel that teams have to make, but ultimately it is what comes with the National League, and again, that's something that's sort of expected and happens all across our program as well. So again, happens in sort of rugby union, happens in our sort of different National League sports as well. So yeah, nothing necessarily changes. Again, we do try and find ways to mitigate as much as possible. So what the National League has is what we call a League Management Committee, an LMC, which is essentially formed up of members, representatives from each of the 5 teams within the National League, and also sort of representatives from the BAFA Rules Committee, from BAFRA, from BAFCA, and also just from BAFA, the NGB as well. And essentially that committee, that group is tasked with advising on the running of the National League. And what we can do in that meeting, in that space, is sort of discuss ways to mitigate or sort of manage different issues, obstacles that the sort of league is facing. For example, going into this season, everyone in the group essentially agreed to have all of UE's home games on a Saturday, again, to potentially mitigate the risk or issues that potentially come with traveling on a Sunday and then having to make it back on a Sunday and then potentially have lectures on early Monday morning or whatever the case is. So again, everyone in the group said, yeah, that's fine. We can all travel on a Saturday to UE and then make it back to wherever we've come from on a Saturday and still have sort of the Sunday free to recover and then obviously be ready for sort of lectures on the Monday. That may not work with all institutions, again, sort of based on the availability of their facilities. But again, having everyone in that room to sort of have these discussions sort of provides ways to sort of mitigate things. Again, it could be a discussion that they have that they could sort of meet halfway, meet sort of in the middle to play games. Again, these are all sort of discussions. So there are ways to sort of mitigate it, but yeah, it wouldn't necessarily change things too much.
Yeah. Also, one thing we've seen this year is the play-ins that's going to happen after we know who wins between SGS Pride and Warwick Wolves. What's the thinking behind the play-ins? We know now when they've seen it more in the adult game as well. So yeah, what was the idea behind that all?
So again, that's something that happens. So there are a few things I might take credit for, but at the same time, a lot of things within American football have to sort of align with the rest of our league and knockout program. And the playoff game is an example of that. So the whole notion of the playoff game is proving and earning your way into the National League, which again is sort of a universal theme that sits across all our national leagues. It's you have to earn your way into the National League, and that's ultimately what that game is. In a few of the other national leagues, what we have is the bottom team is automatically relegated, and the team that finishes above bottom is the team that is then involved in the playoff game, just because of the depth of the American Football National League. It's just the fifth place team that's being sort of considered, and that's why they're the ones in that playoff game. So, but yeah, the notion behind it is just earning your way into the National League. It's sort of a right you have to earn. It's not something that's sort of just given to you. And linked to that is as a collision sport in box, we have a specific regulation which states any new team joining the American football program can put in a collision sport application, which basically means they are asking not to be put at the bottom of the pyramid, but to be put at a higher spot in the pyramid based on safety concerns, which when SGS came into our program in 21-22, they put in a collision sport application, and that's why they didn't come in at tier 2, they came in tier 1. But within that collision sport application, you can never put in an application to be put in to the National League, again, just because of that notion of you have to earn your way into the National League.
Do I smell a sense that there could be expansion of the National League, or is it going to be 5 and that's it? It feels like you're almost, it sounds like you're reading between the lines, you are amenable to seeing that expand should the Prem teams that are underneath them fit within that operative standard.
Yeah, most definitely. I think when we wrote the implementation, the proposal for change paper and following on the implementation paper for the National League, we made it clear that we are open to expanding the National League. That is something we hope to do in the future. But as you said, it has to sort of be driven by data. It has to sort of be driven by, again, sort of a level of sort of one-sided, I guess, domination in sort of the leagues beneath, and again, sort of those teams beneath showing that they are of the operating standards to be competing in the National League. So yes, that there is definitely scope to expand the National League, and like I said, in an ideal world, that is the point we do want to get to, but we do have to sort of be driven and guided by what the data is showing us.
And obviously, we've got some associate teams, haven't we, and within the process that we, as I know Stuart's mentioned a number of programs that aren't in competition this year, that you've probably still got to come into the competition as well, haven't you? So ever expanding, I'm sure, and let alone flag, and how that might explode in the next couple of years with the Olympics around the corner. Is there anything to mention around a BUCS flag league at the moment, or is that still in the weeds trying to be solved?
What I will say is watch this space. I can't say too much at this moment in time, but we are exploring it greatly.
Of course you are. Why wouldn't you? That is the politician in you, and I understand. So we'll move on quickly before we have to end the podcast.
But I guess the one thing I can say about sort of the flag space is again, in sort of conversations with BAFA and sort of the national program there, the hope is in term 3 to host a number of sort of flag football talent ID days across sort of different regional hubs at universities, again with the hope of obviously finding potentially contact players who can sort of transition to flag, but also looking wider to sort of transitional athletes from sort of different sports who could potentially transition to flag and sort of be on that pathway leading to 2028. So yeah, working with sort of the national program there to sort of organize those days and get those dates booked in. But it's looking like essentially for most of May, we're sort of doing those dates across, like I said, a few sort of separate regional hubs across the UK. And we obviously will be having our third iteration of the Lost or Flag football event as well, which will be happening on the 31st of May at Brunel University. So again, there are these things which I can definitely confirm are sort of happening this term. But in terms of next season, like I said, watch this space. Hopefully, we should be able to sort of make some announcements about that in the near future.
Well, we will be waiting for it for sure, and we'll be excited to hear. But it would be remiss of me to not mention the University of Nottingham are obviously competing within the WFFL already. But yeah, that's to make me correct, and obviously not to brush over that fact. But we look forward to learning more about that. But so we've kind of done quite a bit of looking back, and it's not even finished yet, and we look forward to BUCS Big Wednesday. I always get that the wrong way around, but I nailed it that time, although I had to think about it. But BUCS Big Wednesday is happening on Tuesday. And so, there's obviously lots to be getting on with, but from a BUCS point of view, but what does BUCS Big Wednesday look like for you in your role?
So again, it's an interesting one. I think I was having a conversation with someone about this the other day. So BUCS Big Wednesday is firstly it's one of the two major events we deliver a sort of a box office. But I say a box office, it's not really the box office. It's one of the two major events that our events team deliver. So our events team deliver all our sort of individual and sort of team events, but they also deliver these sort of showpiece major events, which, like I said, BUCS Big Wednesday is one of them, and BUCS Nationals is the other. So BUCS Big Wednesday is ultimately under their remit, but at the same time, it's sort of under the remit of the league and knockouts team, because BUCS Big Wednesday is ultimately the culmination of the league and knockout programs for 16 different sports. So we're going to have 16 different sports taking place at BUCS Big Wednesday, and we have 58 fixtures across the 2 days. So holistically looking at the big picture, it is a massive event. I think just under sort of 2,000 students are sort of going to be taking part in the day. We have over 150 officials sort of helping deliver the event. So that's sort of the wide piece, which, like I said, sort of the events team are sort of responsible for. With having a sort of a funded role, a funded sports role with my role, it's just natural that they sort of allow me to sort of focus on my individual sport, which is why I guess I'm sort of responsible for Big Tuesday, Tremendous Tuesday, Terrific Tuesday. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. But essentially the Tuesday of BUCS Big Wednesday, while still obviously feeding into and trying to make sure everything aligns with the bigger picture of what is happening across the 2 days. So essentially what my role looks like is, I don't know, just delivery of those 3 finals. So everything you can think of that relates to the delivery of those 3 finals. And I keep saying 3 finals because I can't believe we're actually doing and delivering 3 games in one day. I've been involved with 3, if you like, Big Wednesdays before this. And all of them have been 2 finals, and I'd seen the amount of work that needed to be done to deliver 2 finals. But I decided again to add some more to my paper or to my plate, just because, why not doing enough when I've added another final. So yeah, it's going to be a very, very exciting day, which I can't wait for.
I did think when I saw that third game come on the slate, and having been involved with organising finals days for BAFA and having 2 fixtures, and having seen how frantic you were running around last year when I was volunteering with BAFRA, I was kind of questioning myself why we added the third game on that day. But fair play to you, and I think it'll be a massive showcase of sort of that Premiership and Tier 1. I'm doing Andy now, and Tier 1 football, and it'll be a massive showcase on the day. Are there any sort of events going on around the actual games themselves? Obviously, they're being live streamed, but is there anything around the pitches that those that are attending can come and get involved with?
So not majorly this year. So we'll have some activation areas from our American football program partner, Football America, but we'll also have some sort of activation areas from sort of our other partners as well. So AHDB, Agricultural Horticultural Development Board. We'll also have some sort of fan activation areas sort of set up. But aside from that, not a whole lot of sort of other events. Again, as you can sort of imagine, with the extra game added, we just wanted to make sure we focused on delivering those games, just because, again, we've seen how much work those 2 games have been in the past. So we just wanted to ensure that, again, just the experience for sort of the players being involved and coaches involved didn't necessarily diminish and drop. So again, we wanted to just ensure and focus on that piece. Again, it should still be an incredible day. So again, sort of a shameful, shameless plug, if you wish. Tickets are available, so please, if you're listening to this, go onto the BUCS website to purchase your tickets to be in attendance. But like you said, all 3 games will be live streamed as well.
I was going to set you up for a shameless. I was going to set you up for a shameless. I was going to set you up for the shameless plug, and you just came out with it anyway. So no,
it's all right. I jumped straight in there.
No, it's fine. It's fine. So 3 games, 10:30 kickoff, 2 o'clock kickoff, and 7 o'clock.
Yep, 10:30, 2 o'clock, and 7 o'clock. And yes, I know 10:30 is going to be tough for the teams involved. Bearing in mind, one of them is Northumbria as well, so coming up from the north of England. To be fair, it's not incredible travel either from Brunel. Unfortunately, it's what we had to be done to sort of fit those 3 games in. And again, I'll be sort of honest as well and transparent. Initially, I think you might have seen it as well in the sort of initial drafts of Appendix 2A, which we shared, and I shared it at the BAFCO convention as well. The National Vars game was actually due to take place on the Wednesday, so we're only going to have the 2 games on Tuesday and 1 game on the Wednesday. But like I said, American football is just one of the 16 sports taking place at Big Wednesday. So again, we have to sort of fit into the wider picture of what is happening across those 3 days. And ultimately, because rugby league are playing on the same pitch on the Wednesday, we couldn't essentially make our game happen on the Wednesday as well. So that's why all 3 games are happening on the Tuesday. And I know not everyone at Brunel and Northumbria are necessarily happy about the 10:30 start. But again, my suggestion is come down on the Monday night if you can, make it a big event. Get there, have a nice stretch on Tuesday, walk around Loughborough, and I'll be there bright and early at 7:30, saying hello to you with a smile on my face and making your finals experience the best day ever. So
awesome. And of course, you want to be able to corral that day to be touchdown Tuesday, don't you? That's what you're trying to do.
That's the one, Andy.
There you
Tuesday.
go.
I've been holding that for about 6 minutes now.
That's the one. I'm sending that out to my engagement team straight away.
Jeez, where's my copyright lawyer?
Get it copyrighted quick.
And just another question about finals day in general. As a coach of a tier 2 club, one thing that we don't see really is a North versus South tier 2 final. Can you maybe explain why that is and why that's not been a part of BUCS Big couple of days yet?
couple of
Didn't work.
Yeah, good question. So I guess again it goes back to that sort of holistic picture of BUCS. So how BUCS views our competition pyramid is the Premier tier and Tier 1 are viewed as sort of our performance leagues, our performance leagues, our performance competition, which is essentially why the Premier tier and Tier 1 levels, again, Premier tiers can be split into Prem North and South and Premier National, which we obviously have for American football. Those two tiers, that's why they basically have national competitions. That's why they would have a national knockout competition, so the national championship, the national trophy, or the national vase. But everything beneath Tier 1, so everything from Tier 2 and beneath, is essentially seen as a more regionalized competition. So to be fair, in American football, it's not as set in stone as it is for other sports. But in other sports, we have five regions essentially. So Scottish, Western, Southeastern, Midlands, and Northern. Those are sort of the five regionals or regions we have, which basically every league from Tier 2 beneath essentially has to fit into. And what you have in each of those regions is you don't cross across regions essentially. So you have your own league. So if you take, for example, the Northern Conference, or actually take the Southeastern, you basically have your league and you basically compete in that league. But your knockout competition is going to be one knockout competition for your conference. So just the Western Conference Cup or the Scottish Conference Cup or the Northern Conference Cup. And there is no cross-region competition. And that's essentially what's been replicated for American football. But for American football, we've actually made it better in the sense that you don't actually have that one region. It's the South and it's the North. So we have three leagues that feed into the South and three leagues that feed into the North. So for your knockout competition, you actually are able to sort of play teams across different, I guess, smaller leagues, smaller threads. But yeah, we're not able to do that sort of national North versus South, just because in our regional competitions, we don't want to do that. Again, just because the feedback we have from our members is they want to keep regional competitions regional. So again, limit the travel and limit sort of the costs that sort of associated with that. Again, in an ideal world, yes, that would have been great to have, but just based on how sort of our competition framework is set up, we do sort of have to keep it regional.
Brilliant. No, it's been a fascinating conversation, because we obviously like to get the almost like the insight to the competition sort of thinking, if you like, but also to maybe hang some fruit out for next year, as we hopefully have with the flag stuff. But we appreciate your time coming on, Tonye. It's been great to have this conversation with you. We're really looking forward to Touchdown Tuesday and seeing what happens. But obviously we've got some semi-finals this week. We've got some Tier 2 finals in a week or so's time, and then we've obviously got that play-in playoff. I'll get the vernacular right sooner or later, but obviously we'll understand who's going to be joining the National League in a couple of weeks' time as well, which is obviously really exciting. And then for you, I suppose, you've then got to get back to training, haven't you, and prepare yourself for the adult contact and defend that title that you managed to secure last year.
I do indeed. March is always a very interesting time, because I'm trying to mix what is essentially the busiest time of the season at work with, I don't want to say the start of preseason, because preseason is well on the way, but essentially the most intense period of preseason as well. So it's not great, because obviously I'm going to be missing practice this weekend because I'm going to be in Loughborough ahead of Big Wednesday. Obviously missing practice on Wednesday as well, because I will be in Loughborough for Big Wednesday. So not great, but yeah, I do find ways to ensure that I am still staying on top of things. But yeah, once next week is done and Big Wednesday is essentially out of the way, things sort of dial back a bit, and I can essentially start turning my attentions to the Warriors. And like you said, defending that championship,
Yeah.
which was my first. So now it's the task of defending it.
The slightly harder task of defending it, I'm sure.
Exactly
and of course, you won't have long to wait either, will you? Because I think you've only got a couple of weeks between the playoff and your first game, I suppose, haven't you? So I can't think off the top of my head who that is, but no,
we have Rushmore away first game.
Oh, good for them! Gosh, straight up into the Prem South, and they get to face you lot. But no, good luck to them. But no, I'm really looking forward to seeing this. Yeah, we're obviously really excited to see what happens over the next week or so in BUCS, but also then we get to ramp up our excitement towards the summer leagues, which is just around the corner as well. But you're a very busy man, as you mentioned. You've got quite a small event on Tuesday to deal with. So thank you very much for being so generous with your time and joining us on the Inside Britball podcast. But Tonye, Stuart, Isaac, thank you very much, and we'll catch you again very soon. And thanks for listening. Thank you.